A very warm welcome to you all. Our guest tonight is Jeevesh Augnoo. He is a lecturer in the field of law and he has recently published a book, The Alphabets. Tonight, during this episode of One on One, we are going to learn about the purpose of that book, but also discover the journey of Jeevesh as a writer. Jeevesh, thank you so much for joining us in the studio of the NBC.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's very kind of you.
Jewish stories have the power to change hearts as well as our minds, and in so doing can also influence the way the world functions. You have recently published a book, The Alphabets, which is in fact quite inspiring.
Thank you.
But before learning more about the book, before we talk more about the book, first of all, tell us how did you develop the interest in writing?
So it goes back to the school days. I remember when I was in school, so primary school, I used to spend a lot of time at the library. The library was found by the sea, the Centre Culturel de Lecture et d'Animation, the CLAC. So from the early days, I used to spend a lot of time there reading books, and I used to talk to people. I used to enjoy talking to people and to get, acquainted with what they were doing, things going on. And this is where I started to get into writing, because I used to get inspired by what they said. And then I started writing, making up stories, building up characters, etc. in my mind. And I've never published before. This is the first time. So from the early days of school, I was writing in copybooks. And then I remember when I went to high school, I had the privilege, if I can say, of attending Saint Joseph. And my friends were very supportive. So what I used to do was every day I used to write on the ticket bus, on the ticket, 1 or 2 lines, make up a story, and then we used to keep them for a bit. So it started from there. Then I went to do my studies, and the need to write kind of went away for a bit, and I got back into it recently. And this led me to self-publish on Amazon early this year, and finally publish a hard copy later this year.
So creative writing is your passion, a way for you to release your emotion, pour down your feeling, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The concept of journaling is something I would advise young people to get into because of the way things are at the moment. Sometimes it can get very difficult to be able to manage all of the emotions, things that are happening at work, in your studies, at home. So journaling is a way of expressing your feelings, your emotions, and bringing some sense in what's going on within you. So from this concept of journaling, I started to write and I started to develop some stories, which because I work with young people, I teach, it's easier to get a message across through a story. So, when you're explaining something, as a lecturer, I find it much more easier and practical to get an idea across through a story, as an example. So this is where this creative writing habit started to develop.
And creative writing is also about adding your own flair to a piece of writing. And you've written the book, The Alphabets, in a conversational style, which is very captivating. It captures the attention of the reader throughout the story. But tell us what drew you to write that book, why in that style specifically?
Well, as I said earlier, I like to have conversations, I like to talk to people, and I think there is something quite powerful in a conversation. Like we're having a conversation right now. There's a lot of ideas, emotions, feelings, and sentiments which people at home might be feeling because of us having a conversation. And they're not here in the studio. So the conversation can bring back some memories. The conversation is a way of interpreting things in the way you think things are happening. And I kind of got drawn to that style of writing because a lot of things that we read sometimes, they're written in a factual way. I read a lot of academic papers. They're written in a very formal, factual way. But then you need to have a conversation with the ideas. So that's why I went for this style. Because whenever I read something or I watch a movie, for example, you're having a conversation with the ideas of the producer, of the metteur en scène, of whoever's written the script. So we're always having this conversation. Even if we don't see it, you wake up and you think, what am I going to do today? You're having a conversation with yourself. So that's why I kind of got drawn to this, because we're constantly having these conversations with one another, with ourselves. And I think it's a good way of presenting an idea, of presenting a notion.
Definitely. You started writing this book this year, actually, or
I don't know whether starting to write it this year is the right way to frame it, but I started thinking about it a long time ago, and it started, as some words on a piece of paper. I went away, I came back to it, it didn't take shape, then it lost the shape totally.
structure? Yeah.
So the structure wasn't here. And it was, again, a conversation that I was having with a piece of paper time and time again. What will this be about? Will it be in the form of a book? Will it be in the form of an article? Will it be something that I say on screen or in a podcast? So time and again, I went back to it. And then eventually, at the start of this year, I was actually working on another project, and I decided to take a break. And during that break, the idea kind of shaped up together. All the pieces of the puzzle came together, and that's how the conversation took place, and the alphabets was born.
So, from what you're saying, you actually had the urge of conveying your emotions to a wider audience. You just didn't know exactly what would be the mean or the channel, right?
Exactly, exactly. As I said earlier as well, you know, when you have these conversations and you see there is something that's coming out of it, you want to share it with the world. And if you look at what's happening today, we have an urge to share almost everything. I'm having a coffee, I'll take a picture, I'll share the picture. I went to the beach, I'll take a picture, I'll share the picture. So it's really inviting people to have this conversation. It's really inviting people to engage with what you're putting out there. And a lot went into the book. And what was important was that the lot that goes in, much more should come out. So the idea was really to get people to read the book maybe once and then revisit it a few years later. And I'm sure that when you revisit it later on, there will be much more that comes out of it, because they are, when I was writing it, there were so many layers. Yeah,
right.
there were so many layers in it. And, if we look at it, they're very straight, simple, standard sentences. But I think everybody will look at it from their own perspective. And the deeper the dive, the more they will find sense in maybe not the sentences, but what they're doing with those sentences.
The book is in fact very educational but also very pleasing. It teaches you not only about alphabets but also about life skills, which is, I think, very important to impart to the children from a very young age, right? But how was your creative process in writing that book? And also, I'm very curious to know about the choice of the title.
So, as I was telling you earlier, when it started, it was a blank piece of paper, and then I had the 26 letters of the alphabets to try and find a word which matched it. Because I teach career skills as well where I work, and some of the things that I teach revolve around building students for the world of employment or self-employment. So there are a few things which you need to be able to get into, because this is what the industry is looking for. For example, today, a lot of people need to be critical thinkers. They need to be problem solvers. So you have to be able to build these skills if you want to go out there in the world of work, or if you want to be an entrepreneur. And I was thinking, how can I get these ideas out there for the students? And eventually, the letters started to become words. There are so many words, so I had to make a choice. And eventually, because of what I consume in terms of books, in terms of songs, in terms of music, movies, documentaries, people I meet, it kind of took this shape, because I have a lot of conversation with a lot of people, and from everything that you talk about, there is a lesson. And maybe it's a professional déformation professionnelle, as we say. You try to get a meaning behind somebody's sentence, what somebody says, and you try to extract what that person has said. So the idea was really to get all of this into a very simple form, because what I have also noticed is that we don't read that much today.
That's true.
We fear big, fat books. So, and maybe we've been cultured to do that because nowadays, most of our reading is on the screen. If you look at us today, we read subtitles from Netflix. It's very short. We read text messages, WhatsApp, very short. And our writing as well is very short because most of the times, what do we write? Facebook status or Instagram quotes. So we tend to be very brief, but in that briefty, in that small amount of space that we use, we want to convey a lot. And maybe that's what prevents us from really expressing ourselves because we don't know what to say. We've been restricted in terms of words, etc. So the idea was to really, convey a very powerful and impactful message, hopefully,
Yeah.
to people in very short sentences.
I think that's what the alphabets have done, at least for me, because I felt that when
Thank you.
reading it, it conveyed so much meaning, it had so much depth. The language was simplified in a simple way, but you read it from different perspective each time, and it was like a collection of thoughts that everyone could relate based
Yes.
on their own experiences.
So that was really the idea. Now, you you asked me about the title. When I was doing my studies in the UK, we were still using the maps, the maps, the cards.
Okay.
So they were called A to Z because you could find places on the
Yeah.
maps. So the A to Z was really a way to get you on a path so that you could reach your destination. And I started dabbling with the title A to Z. It didn't really fit in. And then eventually, asking questions, talking to people, the alphabets just came out because the structure of the book is, as you said, articulated around the letters of the alphabets, which hopefully will guide people towards their destination or their journey or their purpose. So that was really the aim of, talking about the alphabets. And also because the book is not really directed towards a particular age group. I think a lot of people can read it, whether they're young, younger, a little less young. So the alphabets kind of, everybody knows about the alphabets. And the alphabets are the very first thing that we kind of learn. So ABC, it's something that we all know. I don't think anybody doesn't really know about the alphabets. So it was really to, just put the word out there that this is something very simple because that's what we say. It's as easy as ABC.
But why have you chosen the themes in such a way about awareness, emotions, motivation? Is it based on your life experiences, something that you will tell your younger self?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, through the conversations I've had, the people I've met, the books I've read, and everything, there are some key messages that I think, especially after all that we've gone through in the past years, that we kind of need to go back to and identify and maybe relate to. And, if you look at what's happening today, we talk a lot about Generation Z and how Generation Z is looking for purpose, is looking for, it's something new, it's something fresh. And sometimes it can be very difficult for them to find themselves. So at one point, I was dealing with a lot of Generation Z people through my classes, through my teaching. And, you could feel that there was something more that they wanted out of what they do. And these key words are things that I, in class, advise them to look for. I also look after the Rotaract clubs in Mauritius, some of them. So I've been involved with young professionals and young people outside of work as well. And these are some of the key themes that we have discussed because they are trying to find a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. They are trying to do what's best for them. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to juggle these two. So this is why I went for these themes, because I think it relates to them in the present, in the past, and in the future as well, and they can build something based on this.
And I think it would be nice if children learned alphabets in such a way instead of A for apple, but A for awareness. In that sense, they would, learn to be more mindful.
I, I think at some point we need to have these conversations. And I have to say, a lot of people ask me, why did you write about a conversation between a mother and the daughter and her daughter? And I, I might be generalizing things, but I think a lot of fathers don't really have this conversation with their kids. And the idea was also to kind of trigger this. So why don't we have this conversation? Why don't we talk about it? Is it something too soft, if you want, or do we need to talk about things which are meant to be just related to what the world is about? And I think this is a side that needs to be explored as well.
But now share with us the process to publish that book. How was the journey of the alphabet from an idea to now a finished book in a book sale store? How do you feel when you see the book now in a store?
Overwhelming. It's overwhelming. It's very pleasant, I have to say, and it's very fulfilling. So I didn't really want to publish the book at first. I just wanted to write it and then share it. I'm also a bit a social media person, if you want. So I was kind of trying to share things on social media. And so it started with the script. And I thought, I'll write something. I read it needed to be a PDF. So I did the first draft on Canva. It's a free software that's online where you can make graphics. So I used that. I made the PDF. And then I tried to upload it on Amazon, but it didn't work. So then I learned about how to self-publish on Amazon, and they have their own software that you have to use. So I had to literally write everything again, and that was very helpful because it allowed me to fine-tune a few things. So eventually I managed to get a draft ready, and then you have to do the graphic design, the visual layout and everything. So once that was done, I uploaded it to Amazon, and it became an ebook. Then Amazon has the possibility for you to order a printed version of your ebook. So one of my friends, very good friend actually, he got the printed version and came to Mauritius. He's in London. And when he came to Mauritius with the printed version, it was something totally different. And then when you see this in hard copy and you look at, it's a different feel. And a lot of people had been asking me, how do we get a copy of the book? And I didn't have any copies of the book. So eventually I spoke to one of your earlier guests, Pridva, and he was the one who explained to me how to actually self-publish here. So I approached a few publishing houses, and then it was a matter of getting the draft ready in the proper format. So I had to speak to my graphic designer friends who volunteered to help me in the project. So this is the product of a teamwork.
Yeah.
And once the graphic part is sorted out, all you have to do then is to get the ISBN, and then you get it published.
It was quite a process then.
It was a good
Yeah.
learning curve actually.
So you've encountered some challenges in your profile as well as a writer, an author, trying to publish that book.
Yes, I think one of the main challenges that we encounter is the cost, but there are some options, some opportunities out there where you can actually ask for funding. For example, from the Ministry of Arts and Culture, there is a fund. You can also approach private individuals. If you have a strong support network around you, they can also help you in terms of the funding. The other problem that I faced was the layout, the mise en page, because I didn't really understood how it had to be done. So you need to have a real team of within one person who knows, who understands how to do the mise en page. I mean, I wrote it in a certain font, and then my friends, graphic designers, they were the ones who told me, you could change this font because it's much more impactful and brings out the message that you really want to share.
Jeevesh, the book also contains certain quotations, writings from other writers. So, who are your influences when it comes to writing?
It's very difficult to pinpoint one or two, but I'm a very big fan of Agatha Christie. And it has nothing to do with the way that I wrote, but she's one of the writers that influenced me in terms of what I read and how I read. And also there is a local author, Manish Bunjan, who works at Rogers, and I follow him on LinkedIn, and he shares some very insightful posts as well. So in terms of keeping things simple, I've learned a lot from a lot of writers, but if I had to take names, if you want, these are the two names that come to my head.
So, why have you chosen to include the quotations before each chapter actually in that book?
The quotations really are a way of identifying with people because, you know, if you look at what we do today, we tend to identify with a quote. We tend to have our own internal war cry, which is our personal quote. You know, I can do it, yes, we can, for example, Barack Obama. So this was a way of giving them, if you want, an appetizer in terms of what was coming next, but also a way to catch a wider audience because I know a lot of people in their speeches, in their writings, for example, when they're doing their research, they like to use quotes. So this was a way to help them identify themselves with what was in the book.
Jeevesh, you've mentioned that you actually liked reading as well as writing since a very young age.
Yeah.
But what took you long to publish your first book?
As I told you earlier, you know, there were so many things that happened. I went back to it. There's also the process of writer's block, which
It happened to you?
happened to me a lot of times. And, you know, you see things differently at different moments in time. And it's not, I won't say easy, but the idea that you had at the start, maybe 2 weeks down the line, you see things differently. And also, you know, I've been speaking to a lot of people, and to try to get all of that into simple lines took a bit of time. So what took me so long was life happened.
The mind was all over the place then.
Sometimes yes, sometimes yes.
Share with us, though, some of the feedbacks you've got from your readers.
I've received some very positive feedback. Some people told me that the book was very insightful, that it really helped them understand the relationship that they had, and that a lot of people could relate to what was in the book, that they had a similar relationship with their mother, or that they wanted to have a similar relationship with their kids. So in terms of the feedback, it has mostly been positive, but very overwhelming because I wasn't really expecting that kind of positive feedback from everyone.
Jeevesh, do you actually have any particular audience in your mind when you are writing a book?
At this point in time, I would say my audience in mind is really the people I work with. So mainly young people who've just finished college or started university or started out in the world of work. Young people, really.
Okay. And now, are you actually working on a particular project, planning to write a new book?
Yes, I'm actually working on two projects, and as I mentioned earlier, the writer's block has been playing up for a bit. So, you know, one of the projects I'm working on is another conversation, and hopefully it's going to cater for the father-son conversation in a little bit.
Okay, this time for the son.
Not entirely, but
Yeah.
somewhere around there. And it's another conversation about life, about things in general, and I think it will be quite interesting. And the other project is actually the initial project that I have been working on that I still haven't completed. It's a compilation of the quotes that I have written. So I write a few quotes in Creole, and I'm trying to get all of them together, but with a certain structure, with a certain sense. So there are quite a few of them, and it takes time.
So how are you dealing with a writer's block?
So, the writer's block kind of comes and goes, and sometimes all I do is just nothing. And I think this is something we need to learn to do nothing, because we are so used to doing things, we get distracted. So, the writer's block, for me, the way I've dealt with it is by doing nothing, by reading something else. And my go-to book is actually Agatha Christie, because it gives me back this impetus to read again, to write again. I don't know why there's a lot of magic in the way that she writes. The other things that I have done is to go for a walk. I live by the sea, so I usually go and sit by the sea and just listen to the waves. So it's really, just leaving everything and then getting back to it with fresh perspectives.
Yeah, disconnect to connect again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We are actually drawing towards the end of this episode, but before that, Jeevesh, any advice you would like to give to our audience to encourage them to take that leap of faith like you've done with your first book and reach out for their dreams?
What I can say is that, you have to dream big, and you have to, and I speak as a lecturer, you have to unlearn. I know we all talk about learning, learning, and learning, but you have to unlearn. There are so many things that we have learned in a certain way, which doesn't really work today. So we have to be able to take steps to unlearn and relearn so that we can move in the direction we want to move. Things are changing, circumstances are changing. I think we all talk about the new normal, about the world as a new normal, but we don't really talk about us as a new normal. And with what's happened with the pandemic, we really had a lot of time to sit down and talk to ourselves, have this conversation with ourselves, to really realize, what was important, what actually mattered, what do we need to do. And maybe to simplify, I would say you try to live your dream, but leave it with a purpose. Leave it with a purpose, and to make it very simple, the purpose is to make life better for everyone around you as well as for you. So, whatever dreams that you have, I think if you work hard and smart, it's possible, but don't do it alone. You absolutely need to have a team. You have your family, you have your friends. There will be strangers that will come along and help you. But stay true to your values, what you believe in, and make sure that whatever you do, everybody around you is actually benefiting from this.
Thank you so much, Jeevesh, for these inspiring words.
Thank you.
It was a real delight to have you on the set tonight
Thank you very
and
much.
learn more about your journey.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, we have now come to the end of this episode. I hope you have enjoyed this episode as much as I have. We hope now to catch you next week at the same time, same channel. Have a great evening.